when you think about Pearl Harbor, you probably picture that sudden, devastating attack, right? The surprise.
Hmm.
But what often gets missed, and what we're really digging into today, is the incredible, meticulous planning behind it. The Japanese strategy, it was audacious, maybe even, well, strategically brilliant in its own way, or at least a very calculated risk.
Definitely calculated.
So this deep dive, it's your shortcut to understanding the thinking, the tactics, the operations, straight from the people who planned and did it.
Yeah.
And our source for this is pretty unique. It's a historical document from 1946.
Just after the war ended.
Exactly. Compiled from the memories of key Japanese naval officers who were right in the thick of it. We're talking Admiral Nagano, chief of the Naval General Staff, and Captain Fuchida, who actually led the first attack wave.
That's right. It's a rare window into their viewpoint.
So our mission today.
Our mission is really to unpack the specifics. How is this complex operation conceived, planned, and then executed? All from the Japanese perspective.
Which is key.
It is.
Yeah.
But we do need to remember, like the source itself says, this is based on memory, recorded pretty soon after the war ended.
Right.
So it's generally accurate, gives us a fantastic insight, but maybe some minor details could be slightly off, or perhaps it's not the complete picture. Still, it's an unfiltered look at their reasoning.
Absolutely. Usually the story is just what happened. Today we're trying to flip that, get into the why and the how from the Japanese side, a perspective you don't often get in this kind of operational detail.
Yeah, it's often overshadowed.
Okay, so let's start with the big question. Why Pearl Harbor? What was the fundamental goal? The document says it pretty bluntly, to render impotent the U.S. Pacific Fleet.
And that's a really important distinction there. Pearl Harbor wasn't the end game for them.
Right, not the ultimate goal.
No, it was a means to an end, a tactical move for a larger strategic purpose. Primarily, they needed time, and they needed freedom of action for their South Seas operation. That involved invading the Philippines, among other things.
Oh.
And it also helped them defend their mandated islands. So it was really about buying breathing room for those bigger plans in the Pacific.
Wow, such a bold plan. It must have had a champion, someone pushing it. Who first came up with this idea?
That would be Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet.
Yamamoto.
He was the one who initially proposed the concept, put it on the table.
And when did this serious planning, the nuts and bolts, really start?
Well, the very first preliminary study was ordered surprisingly early, actually, January 1941. Rear Admiral Onishi handled that.
January 41. Wow.
Yeah, but the really detailed work, hammering out the actual plan, that kicked off in early September 1941. That's when you had key people from the Naval General Staff, the Combined Fleet Staff, the 1st Air Fleet Staff, all collaborating. A big effort.
So once they decided why, the how must have been a huge logistical puzzle. How do you keep the force small enough to sneak across the Pacific, but strong enough to deliver that knockout punch?
That was a major challenge. Their solution was pretty smart. They basically beefed up the air groups of their best carrier divisions, Carrier Divisions 1 and 2, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu.
The famous ones.
Right. And they also reinforced Carrier Division 5, the newer ones, Sukaku and Shokaku. They didn't just add planes, though. They took highly trained veteran pilots from other divisions like Carrier Division 4 and concentrated them, created these elite, specially trained air groups.
And that training, it sounds like it was incredibly intense, started back in August 41.
Oh, absolutely intensive and very specific. They weren't just practicing dogfights. They were drilling specialized techniques vital for Pearl Harbor.
Like the torpedo drops.
Yeah, exactly. Shallow water torpedo drops were a huge focus. Plus horizontal bombing, dive bombing, strafing. And it wasn't just the pilots. The surface ships practiced refueling at sea over and over again. That was absolutely critical for the long journey.
Makes sense.
By late November, the document states the task force was considered satisfactorily trained. That really tells you how much effort went in and how confident they felt.
All right, let's talk about getting there. The route. That seems like a massive decision. They had 3 options: north, central, south.
That's right. 3 main corridors across the Pacific were considered.
And they picked the northern one. Why? That sounds like rough seas, difficult conditions.
It was. Adverse weather was a real concern, especially for refueling at sea. Imagine trying to link ships with fuel hoses in the middle of a heaving North Pacific.
Yeah, sounds like a nightmare.
But that northern route offered the single biggest advantage. Surprise. It had the best hope of avoiding detection by United States Navy land-based search planes.
Because it was further away from U.S. bases.
Exactly. The other routes, central and southern, passed much closer to places like Midway and Wake Island. Way too risky. They figured maximizing surprise was worth battling the weather and the refueling challenges.
Okay, so surprise is everything. But how do you keep a massive naval force secret crossing thousands of miles of ocean? What measures did they take? This part's fascinating.
It really is. A huge game of cat and mouse. They timed their passage to go between Midway and the Aleutians, staying outside the usual patrol plane ranges.
Clever.
They had screening destroyers way out ahead. Orders were, if any ship was sighted any ship at all, the main fleet was to immediately divert course.
Wow.
They even sent 3 submarines out ahead, like an early warning system.
Yeah.
But probably the most crucial thing,
Radio silence.
complete radio silence. The entire way. That was absolutely paramount. No transmissions allowed.
That faith in their ability to refuel under those conditions and that strict radio discipline, it really shows their commitment, doesn't it?
It does. Those two things, absolute secrecy and confidence in refueling, made the northern route viable in their eyes. They were betting heavily on their training and discipline.
So the routes chosen, the forces trained. What about the timing? When exactly did they decide to attack? I read December 10th might have been tactically better, more darkness, but they went with the 7th Hawaiian time.
Right. The 8th east longitude date, which was Sunday, December 7th in Hawaii. The choice wasn't purely tactical like moon phase. It was a mix. The general international situation played a big part.
The diplomacy failing.
Right. And also what they called the possible advantages to be derived from a Sunday attack. The idea was the fleet might be less alert, weekend routine. This decision wasn't made in isolation. It involved Imperial headquarters and the Combined Fleet Command.
And the specific attack time, 8 a.m. Hawaiian time.
The plan was to launch the planes near dawn. That gave them maximum daylight for the actual attack, for pilots to see targets, coordinate, but still hit early in the morning for that surprise element. 0800 Hawaiian time was the target for the attack itself, which was 0330 their time, Japanese time.
So who actually knew the full plan, and when was the final green light given?
It was kept incredibly secret, a very tight circle. Nagano and Yamamoto, they made the conditional decision back on November 3rd, attack if the negotiations fail.
Conditional.
The final definitive go-ahead for the plan came from Admiral Yamamoto himself on December 1st.
And who else knew?
Very few. The document says those cognizant of the complete plan were basically high-ranking Navy brass, their chiefs of staff, a few selected staff members. Extremely limited.
What about, say, the Army or the Emperor?
No non-Navy personnel knew the specifics. The Emperor was informed generally, but only after the ultimatum was delivered. Basically, that they planned to attack the main U.S. fleet strength, but not the detailed how or where of Pearl Harbor specifically.
Incredible secrecy. Okay, let's dive into the attack plan itself. Objective, knock out the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Main weapon, torpedoes against battleships and carriers.
Yes, but they knew Pearl Harbor presented unique problems. Their intelligence was pretty good on that. They knew the harbor was narrow and shallow.
Right, not ideal for torpedoes.
Not at all. And they also anticipated the probability of torpedo nets being used. Those were major tactical hurdles they had to overcome.
Okay, this is where the innovation comes in. How do they solve that shallow water problem? Torpedoes usually need depth to run, don't they?
They do, or at least that was the conventional wisdom. This was a really significant adaptation. They developed and attached special stabilizers, basically wooden fins, to their aerial torpedoes.
Wooden fins?
Yeah, and they combined that with launching from an extremely low altitude. The fins helped control the torpedo's entry angle into the water, stopping it from diving too deep and burying itself in the mud. It was a technique they practiced relentlessly.
Amazing. And the torpedo nets, what was the plan B if they couldn't get past them?
They had one. They didn't put all their eggs in the torpedo basket. The plan explicitly included horizontal bombing and dive bombing attacks as well. If torpedoes failed, bombs would still hit the targets.
Makes sense.
And another crucial part, the fighter planes. Their job was vital. They had to destroy American aircraft to prevent counterattacks.
Protect the bombers and the fleet.
Exactly. Priority 1 was engaging any American planes already in the air. If there was no aerial opposition, then they were to strafe planes on the ground, hit them before they could take off.
Okay, let's track the task force's actual movement. They left Hirokabu Bay. When was that?
November 26th, 0600 hours, headed out on that secret northern route.
Into the empty ocean.
Pretty much. Then, the critical message arrived on December 2nd. Instructions confirming negotiations had failed. X day was set for December 8th, their time.
So it was definitely on.
Yes. And the refueling, that really tricky part, they pulled it off successfully on December 3rd. That must have been a huge relief.
I bet. Now, you mentioned contingencies. They had plans for what-if scenarios during the approach.
Oh yeah, very detailed standing orders. It shows how much thought went into potential problems.
Like what?
Okay, so if they were discovered before X-2 day, 2 days before the attack, the order was turn around, go back to Japan, attack off.
Wow.
If discovered before X-1 day, the day before, it was up to the task force commander to decide what to do. Bit more flexibility there.
Right.
But if they were discovered on X-1 day, or even on the morning of X day itself, the attack was to proceed. No turning back at that point.
Go regardless.
Go regardless. Also, crucially, if negotiations succeeded at any time before the attack launched, the whole thing would be canceled.
So there was an out right up to the last minute.
There was. They also had plans if the American fleet intercepted them, a counterattack. If pursued back towards Japan, the main Japanese fleet would support them. And if the U.S. fleet wasn't in Pearl Harbor, scout at a 300-mile radius, attack if found, otherwise withdraw.
They really tried to cover the bases.
They did. And to help maintain the secrecy, back in Japan, the main fleet units and land-based air forces kept up deceptive communications. Radio traffic designed to make it seem like the striking force was still in home waters.
A ghost fleet.
Pretty much. So all this led them to the launch point, 200 miles north of Oahu at 0730 Hawaiian time, December 7th. Ready to go.
And the attack unfolds. 2 waves, right? Each with different groups for different jobs.
That's correct. 2 main waves. But even before them, there was reconnaissance.
Oh.
Yeah, just before the attack, 2 ship-based seaplanes flew over Pearl Harbor and Lahaina roads to check target positions. And 4 other seaplanes patrolled around Oahu during the attack itself. Last minute, eyes on the situation.
Okay. Then the first wave. Took off at 6 a.m., arrived about 0740.
Around then, yeah. Attack order given for EO 750. And this wave had very specific target priorities.
Walk us through it.
First, the dive bombing unit 54 planes. Their job, hit hangars and planes on the ground at places like Ford Island and Wheeler Field.
Yeah.
Goal, stop counterattacks before they could start. They hit about 0755.
Cripple the airfields first.
Then, almost simultaneously, the torpedo unit 40 planes. These carry the modified torpedoes for shallow water. Their targets, battleships and carriers. With the carriers gone, they focused heavily on battleship row. They attacked around 0757. Most skillful pilots chosen for this.
Then the fighter.
Right, the fighter striking unit 45 Zeros. Their job, achieve air superiority. Attack any U.S. planes airborne, then strafe planes on the ground at all the main airfields. Hickam, Wheeler, Ford Island, Iwa, Kaneohe. They hit grounded planes around 0800.
And finally, horizontal bombers.
Yes, the horizontal bombing unit, 50 planes. They targeted the battleships too, but with heavy 800-kilogram armor-piercing bombs dropped from high altitude, like 3,000 meters. Harder to aim, but devastating if they hit. They attacked around 0805.
So both torpedoes and bombs hitting the battleships.
Exactly. That dual approach was important. Torpedo nets were a concern. Plus, ships were often moored side by side. Bombs were sometimes the only way to hit the inboard ship. It maximized their chances of doing critical damage.
Okay, that's the first wave. Then the second wave comes in. When did they launch?
About an hour and 15 minutes after the first. They sighted Oahu around 0840, started their attack around 0900.
And their targets. More the same.
Similar structure, slightly different focus. The horizontal bombing unit in this wave, 54 planes, mostly went after hangars and grounded aircraft again at Hickam, Kaneohe, Ford Island. Still focused on preventing counterattacks.
Keeping the air power down.
Exactly. The dive bombing unit, 81 planes this time, was supposed to target carriers and cruisers. They had lighter 250-kilogram bombs, not ideal for battleships. But with no carriers present, they mostly attacked the battleships again, or other large ships like cruisers.
And fighters again?
Yeah, 36 Zeros in the fighter striking unit, continuing to suppress any air activity and hitting planes on the ground at the main fields.
And after they dropped their bombs and fired their guns?
Each group attacked for maybe 30 to 60 minutes. Then they had designated rendezvous points, met up with their fighter escorts, and flew directly back to the carriers.
Direct return. No evasive routes.
The document says it was impossible to withdraw on deceptive courses. The flight was just too long, fuel was critical, so a straight shot back was the only practical way.
Let's talk about the price. What did this cost the Japanese? Aircraft losses seem surprisingly low from the numbers.
They were, relatively speaking. The first wave lost only 9 planes, 3 fighters, 1 dive bomber, 5 torpedo bombers.
Just 9.
The second wave lost more, 20 aircraft, 6 fighters, 14 dive bombers. So the grand total was 29 aircraft lost in the attack itself.
29 out of How many total?
Around 350 aircraft participated in the two waves. So yeah, loss rates were low. They also lost submarines, one large fleet-type submarine, and all 5 of the midget-type submarines they deployed.
Ah, the midget subs. Tell us about them. That's always a fascinating side story.
It is. They had about 10 to 12 large eyes-type submarines involved overall. Some were lookouts. 5 of these carried the 2-man midget subs.
An experiment, you said?
Largely, yes. They were launched near Oahu with orders to sneak into Pearl Harbor after the air attack started and then attack ships inside.
Did they achieve anything?
It's murky. One midget sub did manage to radio back reporting on the air attack results on the night of the 7th. Another sent a message claiming it damaged 1 or more large warships inside the harbor. And a large submarine outside the harbor did report seeing a huge explosion that seemed to verify that claim partially.
What?
But none of the 5 midget subs returned. So their exact actions, what they hit or didn't hit, their full story was never really known for sure, lost with their crews.
And what about the damage the Japanese thought they inflicted, based on pilot reports and photos right after?
Their estimates were pretty dramatic based on what the pilots reported seeing in the photos they brought back. No immediate photo recon planes were sent, just what the attack planes captured.
So what were the claims?
They claimed 4 battleships sunk,
Ah.
1 cruiser sunk, 2 tankers sunk, plus 4 battleships heavily damaged and 1 battleship lightly damaged. For aircraft, they estimated 10 American planes shot down in aerial combat and a whopping 250 destroyed on the ground, plus more may be destroyed inside hangars.
Significant claims. Now, a question that always comes up. Why didn't they attack again? Why no third wave or even an invasion? The source addresses this.
It does. And their reasoning was quite logical from their strategic viewpoint.
Which was?
Their main goal, remember, was to neutralize the U.S. Pacific Fleet's capital ships, delay the U.S. response across the Pacific. They felt the air attack had largely accomplished that, so no further attack was deemed necessary.
They thought they'd done enough damage.
Essentially, yes. Plus, there were tactical risks in sticking around. They didn't know where the American carriers were. Finding them quickly by air search was unlikely.
The missing carriers. Always a key point.
Huge point. And they were worried about a counterattack from land-based planes they estimated were still operational in Hawaii, maybe 50 or more bombers.
Yeah.
So a quick withdrawal seemed prudent.
And an invasion. Landing troops.
Never part of the plan for the initial attack. They simply didn't have enough time back in November to prepare the logistics, the troop transports, everything needed. And trying to bring that kind of invasion force along would have totally compromised the secrecy of the approach. It wasn't feasible for this operation.
Makes sense. Were there any other operations happening around the same time, maybe as diversions?
Yes, a couple of notable ones. The Midway Neutralization Unit, a small surface force, bombarded Midway's air base on the night of the 7th. Just a harassment, really?
Draw attention.
Perhaps. And then on the way back from Pearl Harbor, 2 carriers, Soryu and Hiryu, along with cruisers and destroyers, were detached on December 16th to go help with the invasion of Wake Island. So supporting those broader operations.
Right. Connecting back to that larger South Seas strategy, what kind of intelligence were they working with for all this planning? How did they know what was in Pearl Harbor?
They used several sources. Interrogations of crews from merchant ships that had recently been in Hawaii. That was one source in mid-November.
Interesting.
Their own submarines were doing reconnaissance in Hawaiian waters right before the attack. And they even monitored commercial radio broadcasts coming out of Hawaii. Listening for clues, maybe ship movements, routines. They pieced together info from various places.
Okay. And we should probably remind ourselves one last time about the nature of this source material.
Yes, definitely worth reiterating. This detailed account comes from Japanese officers recalling events in 1946. While it's considered generally accurate and incredibly valuable for its perspective, it is based on memory. So there could be minor inaccuracies, maybe some gaps. It's a snapshot from that specific time.
Understood. So stepping back, what's the big picture here? What does this detailed look from the Japanese side really tell us about Pearl Harbor?
Well, I think it really highlights the sheer complexity and the calculated risks involved. It goes so far beyond just a simple surprise attack. You see this immense amount of meticulous planning, the training, the contingency planning. It was a massive, carefully orchestrated operation, a strategic gamble of huge proportions, frankly.
It really was. The key takeaways for me are that incredible planning, the innovative solutions they came up with for technical problems like the torpedoes, the clear strategic thinking behind the timing and the targets, and just how disciplined they were about secrecy and sticking to those contingency plans. It wasn't just bold, it was choreographed.
Absolutely. And that leads to a really interesting thought for you, the listener, to Ponder.
Mm-hmm.
Given all that detailed planning, those specific conditions for go or no go,
Mm-hmm.
how different might things have been if just one or two things had changed?
Like if they'd been spotted a day earlier.
Or what if those diplomatic negotiations had actually succeeded at the 11th hour? The attack would have been canceled. How different would history look?
It really underscores the value of looking at history from multiple angles, doesn't it? Especially perspectives like this one, which aren't always front and center. It's the only way to get that truly, well-informed view.